All right, thank you. As she said, my name is James Green. I am a senior consulting manager with Strategic BCP. I think we are the best business continuity consulting company in the world, and that is the only pitch you will hear from me for the rest of the afternoon. So first thing, if you guys don't mind, this wasn't in your deck, but I want to throw a little swerve in there. I want to talk about a few things before we get started. Anyone here had a busy couple of weeks? Had some new friends, right? Harvey, Irma. It's been an interesting time to be in our profession. Jose, Norma, Maria, Lee, whole big family of fun. And you're probably wondering, all right, we're supposed to be talking about active shooters in the workplace. Why is this guy up there talking about hurricanes? And the reason is that blue dot's my house. So I live in Florida. It's been an interesting couple of weeks professionally and personally. And for most of the state, last Saturday, we were looking at a truly catastrophic event, right? We always tell people, prepare for the worst, hope for the best. And this was one of the few times where my professional life and my personal life intersected. And we were looking at, where I live, a Category 4 hurricane. You can plan for that, you cannot mitigate for that. My builder tells me my roof is rated for 140 mile per hour winds. I didn't want to find out, right? So when I went to bed last Saturday night, it was the first time I didn't know, hey, what's tomorrow going to bring for me, my family, my community? Where is this catastrophic level going to hit us? And I just wanted to share all of that with you guys because thankfully my family had a plan. I was able to help other people who had a plan, other people who weren't as prepared as we were because of the people in this room, because of this profession. I still have people in my house. I'm not there, they're there. They didn't have a plan, they lost power, they lost houses. And so just want everybody to think about, why do we do what we do? Why am I so passionate about business continuity? And I really am. It's because everybody's talking about we need to be prepared now, right? Anyone can pitch business continuity after the biggest storm we've ever seen. But it's the people in this room who talk about business continuity the rest of the time, the rest of the year, when executives maybe aren't engaged, when they're not interested, when they don't see the relevance. So I just wanted to take a few minutes, thank everyone here for what you do. Thank you for having me in Phoenix. You don't appreciate electricity until it's taken away from you. And even just like my kids, watching them have to unplug. There's no Wi-Fi, there's no TV. I did let them eat all the ice cream as it was melting, so that was a good thing. Other than that, a little sketchy. All right, so why are we here? Let's move to a lighter topic, right? I'm not a doom and gloom sales guy. We're not going to spend time looking at perps or pictures of guns or graphic videos. It doesn't help. I'm here for Allison Accounting. The way that I teach companies about active shooters in the workplace, I assume you're not SWAT. I assume you're not military. I assume most of your employees have never seen a gun, wouldn't know what to do with it. So keep that in mind as we talk. My client, my student, is Allison Accounting. So this is how we teach. And I want to get one thing out of the way, because I get this question a lot, and please ask questions. I don't like hearing myself talk. Let's ask questions. First question I almost always get, talk to me about terrorism. Talk to me about the differences between terrorism and active shooter, because there's different response from police. The FBI treats them differently. But for me and for you, what I want you to think about is, if someone shows up with a gun in your workplace, do you care why they're there? In the moment, do you care what their motivation is? You don't. You're not going to go up and ask them, oh, why are you here? What's upsetting you? It doesn't matter. So when we talk to our employees, when we talk to our executive teams, don't get in the weeds between terrorism, active shooter. It's still a person who wants to do a lot of harm to a lot of people. We can sort it out afterwards why. Let's just focus on some response. So what are we seeing, unfortunately, in today's environment, right? We're seeing our kids do these drills. I think we grew up with fire drills and tornado drills. It seemed pretty normal to us. My kids have had 3 of these already. They're going to grow up. This is part of their drill. They do fire, they do tornado, they do hurricane. And what we're starting to see is your employees are coming into HR, your employees are coming into risk, and they're saying, hey, my kids do these drills. My kids have this training. What are we doing? And unfortunately, the reason they do this training is every once in a while, parents are getting this text message. This is not a text message I want to get, right? This is scary. We want to make sure that if these things do happen, we have a plan. So now that I have been doom and gloom, my one other stat, it is 18 times more likely, and I've said this in the media so many times, so I apologize. It is 18 times more likely that over your lifetime, you will experience an active shooter in the workplace compared to a fire. Now, the caveat for that is you'll probably never experience either, right? 1 in 20,000 people experience a fire in the workplace. But what I want you to keep in mind is a fire in the workplace is a very rare, highly improbable event, and yet we're prepared for it. A tornado hitting your office is a very rare and highly improbable event, yet we prepare for that. Active shooter is another very rare, highly improbable event, and I hope no one in this room ever experiences any of the 3, but we want everyone to be prepared for all 3. I don't know if that's rain or the hurricane followed me. Air conditioning. Oh my goodness. All right, so now that I've talked happy for 10 minutes, right, what's the focus here? We want to train our employees. We do not want to scare them. People have enough to be worried about these days without us freaking them out. So how do we do that? So I want you to introduce this as part of your existing life safety program, right? We talked earlier about tornado drills. Yeah, I'm familiar with those. Fire drills, I'm also familiar with those. Let's add on to our life safety umbrella some active shooter training. So another question I get a lot of times, we don't have life safety at our company. We don't do fire drills. We don't do tornado drills. We don't do evacuation. Here's the thing, if you don't do any of those things, you cannot lead with active shooter. You will freak people out and they will assume you're doing this specifically in response to a threat. So my advice to you before we even get into some of this is, if you don't do fire drills, if you don't do tornado drills at your company, you have to do those first. You'll get very widespread buy-in, management all the way down to employees on that. Once you've done those, then you can introduce this as just another component of life safety. So first question I have for you guys. Active shooter in the building, who pulls the fire alarm? Anybody? That's right, no one. 2 reasons. You pull the fire alarm, who's responding? Fire. You pull a fire alarm, what are your employees looking for? They're looking for a fire. right? So I've talked with a lot of companies and worked with a lot of companies. They say, well, we just pull that fire alarm. Don't pull the fire alarm. It's not a fire. It's different. Speaking of fires, if you went to school in the US, you probably remember, who remembers what they were taught to do in the case of a fire? Anyone? Yes. Stop, drop, and roll. Why do we teach this in schools? It's simple. The words are commands, right? They're not lost in translation. They're kind of self-explanatory. Stop, drop, roll. There's no ambiguity. So what we teach, what the Department of Homeland Security, and you guys are probably familiar with this, hopefully, similar methodology in an active shooter. Run, hide, fight. And this is where we get some nuances where it gets interesting. So why do companies use run, hide, fight? One, it's simple. It's easy to remember. And again, your employees, unless you work at the police department, are not martial artists, are not familiar with weapons or tactics. We want to teach them something simple and practical. Stop, drop, and roll, anyone can do. Run, hide, fight, anyone can do. And so we're going to spend the rest of the time talking about some practical steps for run, hide, fight, some things that I've seen companies do right and wrong on how to train this. So before we get into this, this is the one twist with run, hide, fight. In a fire, you always leave, right? You wouldn't say, oh, the building's on fire, I'm just going to hang out here. You always evacuate. With a tornado, you always shelter in place, right? These are static decisions. Unfortunately, with active shooter, you have to make dynamic decisions based on the situation. So we'll go into each of these in a bit of a detail. The first is always run. If you're trying to harm me and I'm not in the room, you can't hurt me, right? The second one has actually become more of a challenge over the last 2 years is hide. But this is this is a temporary decision. A lot of schools teach lockdown. I'm not a fan of lockdown. I want you to hide, but only until it's safe to leave. We've seen some problems in the real world with lockdown, people just waiting in a room. And then the last one, we'll talk about fight. What does that mean? How do I teach my employees to fight? What are some liabilities with that? So I want to ask another question. Who here uses their parking lot as their assembly areas? A lot of people. It's easy, right? You put a sign out in the parking lot that says assembly area, it may say A and B. There's two problems with that. If you have a large building and you have 3,000 people in your parking lot, where do the first responders come? They have to be farther away from your building. We've seen with larger buildings, with some school campuses, the more people trying to be outside, the farther and farther away first responders have to be. The other problem with this is if the person who's trying to harm you is a former employee or current employee, they know exactly where you're going. And we've had several instances where people have tried to set up secondary devices at assembly points. Thankfully, none of them have worked. But something to keep in mind, again, fire is different than active shooter. Fire, you're trying to account for everyone, to see who's left in the building. Active shooter, we want everyone to be safe. Let's follow up on them later. So why is the first step run? The first step is run because these happen really quickly. You see these numbers, 2 minutes or less, 5 minutes or less. If I run, everyone knows we're on the clock. The police know, the person knows, the clock is ticking. Just run and keep running until you're tired and run some more. I just teach people just go. These happen fast, 3-4 minutes, right? We've been talking for 15. So think about that.
Forgive me,
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. So best practice, I guess, is a little controversial, but hey, why not? For fire is assembly and head counts, but I've never seen it work. Because if I have more than 20 people, let's say I have 2,000 people in a building, how are you going to count there's 1,987 people here? It doesn't always work. So what I try to teach people with fire is, hey, on the way out the building, if you see someone and you can't help them, tell someone when you get downstairs. Give them specifics. Hey, there's a guy in a blue suit on the 3rd floor stairwell. And the reason you want to give specifics is so that if the fire person comes up and sees a woman in a red dress, they still know guy in a blue suit. So, head counts in theory are good. I've never seen them work in reality. If someone has an example, please come talk to me afterwards. I've just found if it's more than 15, 20 people, it's hard to count. Yeah. Yes. Yep. Yeah. Yep. Who's in and who's out. Yeah, and with active shooters, you never know until it's over how many people are involved. And how many times have we seen breaking news and they're like, oh, there's 5, there's 4, there's 2. The number's always wrong. And so you don't know if we're all going to an assembly point, where are the people who are trying to harm us? The question in the back. Yes. Yeah, so good point. So the gentleman in the back was talking about in a lot of jurisdictions, it is fire code for fires for head counts. And what I'm telling you is if there's an active shooter event, have everyone run. I dare that fire marshal to write you a citation for not firing code. So I understand it's best practice and I understand it is law in a lot of jurisdictions. I have a hard time in real life seeing when it actually works to 100%. Yes. Exactly. And we're going to talk more about communication in a bit because that's a huge piece of it. So, more about run. If it's safe to run, run. If that door's closed and we heard a gun right outside the door, we probably shouldn't run right outside that door, right? You want to make sure you know where you're going. At your work, that's probably easy. At this hotel, or if I'm visiting your work, you don't want people running down alleys and getting stuck in parts of the building they can't get out of. Just like in any event, we train people to train their employees. You encourage people to come with you, but you don't linger, right? Most studies have shown during a disaster, about 1/3 of the people will take action, 1/3 of the people will follow the people taking action, and 1/3 of the people will just be frozen. You want to try to get those people who are mentally engaged, hey, come with me. And they will follow you. And the last thing, and this is key, and I see this in drills all the time with fires too, closest exit, not the exit of habit. So what do I mean by that? Most of our companies now, we have security protocols, we have access control. So let's say every morning I come in the front door, I go out the front door for lunch. I come back in the front door. I go out the front door at the end of the day. I do this 5 days a week for years. All of a sudden there's an emergency event, there's a door right behind me. And every time I run a drill, I see this. People will go all the way to that front door because that's what they're trained to do. I'm not allowed to go out that door. There's exit signs for a reason. So when you run fire drills or when you run evacuation drills, see if those emergency doors are popped. See if people go out them. And a lot of times you have to train them. Yes, you're not allowed to go out that door except for an actual emergency. And I see that a lot. All right, so second step, we can't run. We want to hide. So what can we do? Locked rooms, if we can. I'm seeing less and less offices have locks, or they're all glass, or we're in an open environment, open office. So your first option, locked room if you can. Your second option, room with no windows. What's the best place in a building, room with no windows? Bathrooms. Yeah. Said it's not, this isn't the best, it's the best available option right now. So we want to run, but if you see someone coming down the hallway, you have a choice. Do you try to confront them? Do you step into a bathroom? But again, hide is temporary, right? So we're always looking for a safe opportunity to run. Spread out through the room. I never understand when we run drills, everyone's all together huddled in a corner. If I want to hurt you guys, you've made my job a lot easier. Like, oh, everyone's right there. Spread out through the room. If you think you're going to be stuck in the room for a while, barricade the room. This is kind of tricky too, because let's look at all these doors. They all open out, right? Does anyone know how to lock these doors? Yes. You take your belt off, wrap it around that hinge on the top, and pull. The person from the outside cannot open the door. This does work. I have tried it. So something to think in mind. Keep in mind, we have doors that open out. Barricading the door may not be the best thing. Use the belt. Yeah, right there. Those two, as they separate, is what opens the door. If they stay closed, that door will not open. Now, most office buildings, the door's not this high, right? Here, but we can move tables over. But in most office buildings, you can reach, average height person can reach those. So just something to think about. You're starting to see why I have problems with hide. It's not the best step, but it's a temporary step. And you want to hide when you can't run. So run's been eliminated temporarily. We want to hide. We don't want to lock down and wait, unless you're in a safe room, right? But in most office environments, I've got cubicles, I've got glass, I have doors that don't lock, I have doors that open out. It's not your best option. So temporarily, we can't run, we want to hide. Question? Yes. No, that is not a great option at all. But it's a temporary option. If I had to hide in this room and I was the only one here, if I'm back behind that trash can and that table that has the glasses, it's at least better than just standing right here. But it's not a best option. Yeah. Yeah. If you can get that expense through your CFO of putting in panic rooms, yes. That's very expensive. So, usually you're just, that is an expense most companies are not going to incur. Yeah. Okay. That's a great point, and we're going to talk about that in a bit because communication is, to me, as important as the run, hide, fight. So let's come back to that in a second. This seems self-explanatory, but be quiet. I run drills all the time, and people are hiding in place, and I just start calling phone numbers. And I hear the phone ring. And when everybody's completely quiet, I'll hear your phone vibrate. Leave it at your desk, put it on silent, don't talk, don't make noise. It's a giveaway, right? So this is a step a lot of companies have problems with. This is where legal and HR get mad at me. But let's talk about it. Fight. 61% of all active shooter incidents end before law enforcement arrive. What does that mean? Somebody got involved, right? And unfortunately, that somebody's going to be us. So again, we want to talk about run has been eliminated, hide has been eliminated. Somebody comes into this room. I don't really want to do this, right? But we should do something. And this is where you see some tragedies get worse. So the one shooting I will reference with this group, the Virginia Tech shooter, okay, reloaded his weapons 14 times. So that means 13 times he had no bullets. Nobody took action. And so here's some things we can do, again, at the employee level. We've got Alice in accounting. We've got our employees. This is who I'm working with. It's just us and our coworkers. So what are we going to do? We're not going to arm them. We're not going to send them to martial arts classes, right? What I want you to teach your employees and what I teach people is fight doesn't mean fighting. There's a big difference. Noises, if I clap my hands really loud and you're not expecting it, or even if you are expecting it, that's startling, right? Movement. It's not like the movies where I can run and somebody can shoot me from 50 feet away and hit me. If somebody comes in that door, we should be away from that door. We should be moving. Moving targets are harder to hit. And again, if it's not a gun, if you have a knife and I'm running away from you, I guess you could throw it at me. That solves our problem. Visual distractions. If I throw something at you, most people, right, reflex, are going to put their hands up. So what do we have? Just look around the room. What can we throw at people? Drinks. Coffee's the best. Coffee will slow you down quick. Chairs, cell phones, briefcase, laptop, anything you have, throw it at someone. It's going to slow them down. Spiked high heels, yeah, absolutely. But don't just stand there. And again, we don't have to fight someone. We can distract them. We can overwhelm them. You don't need a weapon to take down another person with a weapon. And law enforcement will tell you this. The attempted assassination of President Reagan, right? When that person pulled out his weapon, there were 15 to 20 police, Secret Service, et cetera, within 30 feet of that person. Not one of them drew their weapon. They just all rushed him and took him down. That's the power of the group. Life is not a martial arts movie, right, where 30 people rush that one guy and he defends and takes them all down. That's not going to happen. 4 people rushing one person are going to win almost every time. And that again comes back to when we talked about people following you. If you say, let's rush that guy, you're going to have enough people to overwhelm them. So keep in mind, these are all practical things. Anyone in your company can throw something, can yell, can clap their hands, can rush someone. You don't have to be trained in any type of fighting. And again, we want to teach our employees, don't lead with this step, right? There's all kinds of legal and liability issues if we say, hey, go fight. This is someone's in this room with us. We can't run. Maybe we are in the bathroom, so there's no hiding. There's no other exit. We have gone down to our least preferable choice. But it beats just sitting there. So teach your employees, hey, we run out of, always look to run, hide temporary, fight, last resort. So a few of you have brought this up, and this is another step. I think this is just as critical as run, hide, fight. It's alert. It's that speed of communication. It's that type of communication. First thing, if you have a PA system, get on it, say what's going on in clear language. Don't say code black, don't say Elvis has left the building, any of that. Because a question I get a lot of times is, well, if we say over the PA there's a shooter, the shooter's going to know. Well, the shooter already knows. They're in the building. So why don't we use code language? Any thoughts? People don't remember? Yes. Exactly. If your employees are only trained once a year, how many of you, maybe it's just the companies I worked at, I send out a business continuity email about a hurricane. Everybody reads it, right? They know exactly what to do. No. You're lucky if 20% of your employees read their emails. If you do training once a year, they're not going to remember. And then the other thing is, like we talked about, consistency. What if I'm a visitor at your company, or it's my first day? I'm not going to know. So use the PA. And if you can, be specific. You talked before about being in a campus. Let's say we have 2 buildings. And I never understand when I help companies run drills, security gets on the PA and says there's an active shooter on campus. Okay, well, that's better than not telling me. But I need more information. Because if there's building A and B, and you say there's an active shooter on the 3rd floor of B, and I'm on the 1st floor of A, I'm running. I'm not hiding, because I know that person's nowhere near me. But if I'm in 3B, okay, now I got to hide. So when you're using the PA, use specific, clear language, and if you can, where the shooter is. Yes. What does that mean? Like paper cut, bomb? And again, I get this a lot, and people are like, well, the shooter knows. Well, yeah, the shooter knows where they are. It's okay to tell the shooter where they are. Let's tell everybody else too. So specific language and location, if you can. Use every method of communication that you have. If you have a PA, use it. Bullhorns, use it. Email. If you have a mass notification system, text. Anything you have. Time is of the essence, right? We talked about these are short events. The sooner me as a potential victim has information, the sooner I can act on it. It doesn't need to be a secret. These are not things we want to keep from our employees. Yeah. So the question is, are there instances where we could aggravate the shooter more? I would say if someone's in your office with a weapon, they're already aggravated. And I don't think you're going to make them... If I come into your office with a gun, my goal is to shoot and kill as many people as possible. So you don't have to worry about making me more upset. Because I've crossed the line. We've all had bad days at work. right? And we've all gone home and like, forget this job, but you let it go. And some people, if they're former or current employees, they don't let it go. And that's when they're going to cross into this irrational state that once they get there, you don't have to worry about, because you can't make it worse. All you can do is make sure your employees know what to do and know where the person is. Yep, and that is, so the question is, if we're telling people there's a shooter on 3B, what if there's more than one shooter? That is an inherent problem in these events, is again, where as information is unfolding, you always hear there's 4, there's 5, there's 3, there's a second person down the street. A lot of times you're dealing with erroneous information, just like any emergency in the immediate aftermath. And that's just kind of a thing that we all struggle with. Yep. So, yeah.
So just a question, and it kind of, you have some tailgate in the building,
Yep.
right? Looks normal, has a backpack, whatever, could be going to different quarters or something, whatever. Tailgates you in, comes on the floor, you've got 3 or 4 buildings. So he pulls out a gun on you before he's on.
Okay.
But nobody on that floor has access to PAs or other. How does someone in that situation be able to have a flag and say, we're in trouble, we have a shooter here on the floor?
So when I train companies, I help them set up floor wardens. Right? So my floor wardens get additional training on fire, tornado. All the floor wardens have access to the PA. And for me, if you don't trust James, the employee in accounting, to have access to the PA, why do you trust James to even work here? Like, I'm okay to be in the general ledger, but I can't have the 4-digit code to the PA. So yeah, that's, yeah. Yep.
There is no way to activate the PA system from the tower. It's all managed by security front desk in between 2 towers, but not the third tower.
A lot of companies, you can access the PAs through the phone system with a code. So a lot of times, check with your security department, but a lot of time that is tied to the phone system. And if not, it should be, because again, like you said, if you have a 30-story building and only one person on the first floor has access to PA, you're creating some inherent problems, not just for a shooter, but with a fire or a bomb or all kinds of things. Well, people aren't going to panic so we should just all pretend there's not a shooter in the building? So I'd like to talk with your, so what I have run into, in every company, we all have our little fiefdoms. And sometimes it's hard for people in any department to give up part of that control. And that's where you go back to having a life safety program, getting buy-in at the executive level, and pushing down from that. Because these days, there's not an executive team I've met with that says, you know what, we don't care about employee safety, we're not going to do fire drills or tornado drills or awareness. And so you can kind of drive it from that level down. Yeah. So the questions about active shooter exercises. Yeah, these are very different than a fire drill because they can be very traumatic and you can have a lot of problems. So what I advise companies is we're going to run a drill with just the crisis management team or the management team on a Saturday. Okay, so employees aren't here. You let all the local law enforcement know ahead of time. You let the media know. You put signs on all the doors. You allow a smaller group of people to walk through your life safety plans as a simulation to see where the problems are. But yeah, just having someone run in with a paintball gun in the middle of the day, not a good idea. Not a good. So a lot of times, like I said, let's just do a weekend or an off shift, smaller team, widely publicized type of event. Question? Okay. Yeah, in general, I want my floor wardens to have the most knowledge about anything that could happen at my site. So if it's a tornado or a bomb or a fire, an active shooter, I want them to have a little bit more training than my average employee, because during an emergency, those are the people I'm relying on. Yeah, if they train in the methodology that your company uses, you've just got to be careful because, like I said, a lot of law enforcement are like, well, just shoot the person. Well, unless you're arming your employees, you need to have some more practical. But yeah, I would advise that your floor wardens are trained on any type of situation that's relevant to your site. Yeah. Well, then that's why I really focus on that's the last option. I'd rather spend more of my time with my employees run. Practical hide. Okay, try to barricade that door. Take off your belt. Where would you run? Where would you go? Fight is the last option. So you do have to be careful. Some trainers, fight is the first option. And if I'm in if I'm in a police department, yeah, that is the first option. If I'm in an IT firm, that's the last option. It isn't. So every jurisdiction, every state has different laws about open carry weapon, closed, what we call concealed carry weapons. Every state has different regulations about what businesses can do to deter or not allow employees from carrying or not carrying. What I will tell you is if you look at a state statistics, so in Florida, if 4% or 3% of the population carries concealed weapons, you can assume, policy or not, 3% of your employees will carry as well, no matter what your handbook says, no matter what they're told not to do. That is, well, yeah, they do, but I'm saying people break the rules, right? So just because you have the sign on the door that says no guns allowed doesn't necessarily mean that we Americans don't like to follow most rules as it is, right? Yeah. 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 And I hope that everyone in this room never experiences an active shooter or fire or tornado. We just want to make sure our employees are aware of these things. This type of training, just like you do with fire and tornado, they can use at their home. They can use when they're at shopping. They can use it with their kids. It's not specific to our workplace. One last question. Yes. Yep. Yep. Yeah, I wasn't advocating that. I just want people to keep in mind that no matter what your laws and corporate policies say, I guarantee in the state of Arizona, there's somebody carrying at this conference. It's just statistically, it's going to happen. All right, so one thing we always forget to talk about is law enforcement arrives. And usually most of our training ends, for a lot of companies, ends right at this moment. But there's things that we want your employees to be aware of afterwards that you may not be aware of. The first thing is, when law enforcement arrives, they are not there to treat any wounded people. They are there to neutralize a threat. And this can be scary and confusing for your employees. They will walk right past you, right? They are there to take care of things. Other first responders will come in behind. So you want to let your employees know, hey, if you're injured, they'll get to you eventually, but they're going to run right past you. And the other thing is, to your point, I'm a police officer. I arrive in this building. I have no idea who works here, who doesn't work here. I have no idea if one of you is the threat, right? So let's not make it complicated for them. When I run fire drills and when I run active shooter drills, I always see people grab their phone. So one person grabbed their Starbucks. I've got my clicker. So imagine I'm running around a corner and a policeman's running around the other side. I'm asking that person to make a very quick decision. Is this a gun? Is this a bomb? Is this a knife? Is it just a PowerPoint presenter? Right? So we want to teach our employees nothing in the hands. Hands visible, open and up. This is kind of the universal sign of I'm not here to hurt you. This quickly allows law enforcement to know this is not a threat, right? This might be. I don't want that person to have to make that determination. So teach your employees until they're cleared, just like in this drill, hands visible, open and up. Something to remember. Here comes the air again. All right, so we have a few minutes for questions. You guys have been awesome so far asking questions, so I appreciate that. Any other questions or any other topics you want to talk about active shooters, or I try to stay away from gun law discussions. Yeah.
Neutralize. What is the officer's primary directive when they identify you? Try to get them down and arrest them?
No. If someone has a weapon in an active shooter type situation, most jurisdictions, the police are going to be trained to shoot that person. Yes. So, yeah, they're not going to try to disarm the person if they feel that person's still a threat to themselves or to others. Yeah. So the question is about how can we be proactive before a person shows up on premise. So a lot of companies have see something, say something programs, and they're usually focused around fraud or theft. And what we want you to do is we want you to expand that to, if you have a coworker that you're concerned about who's acting a little strange or has been saying things, or I worked with a company where an employee was posting things on social media, that can be funneled into your see something, say something program as well. Teach your employees, like, hey, fraud, theft, concern of health of yourself or others, those are all things that can move into that program. Because how many times have we seen in the media after an event, there's all these flags. There's all these people who knew or suspected or saw the person's social media post or YouTube video or overheard them in the break room and never said anything. And it's because employees aren't aware that they should say something. So encourage that as part of your, if you have an anonymous hotline or ethics line or see something, say something, you've already have an apparatus in place at your company. You can use that as well for threats to life. Does it go on? Yes. So thank you. Excellent point. So thank you. I forgot that. Homeland Security has a ton of information that you can use for free. They have templates. They have worksheets. There is a great 6-minute video that is Creative Commons. You can use it. I've used it with a ton of companies. I like it because it walks people through run, hide, fight. It's not too scary, but it strikes the right tone that you need to pay attention. So yeah, DHS has a ton of resources.
What else a lot of companies are doing is putting in a stop and bleed program and augmenting their first aid kit to the option for punctures, band-aids, and some breakthrough. That's another thing that they're considering is having things such as digital suppressive dressings and tourniquets and things like that, and training some of the employees that may already be first responders or EMTs or something.
Yeah. So yeah, you can supplement your first aid kits. You can also have go bags for first responders. Again, if police arrive on site, they may not know the building. You can have a blueprint of the building ready to go for them. Here's the layout of the building. Yes. Yep. Alice. Yeah, so there's a great example. There is another system called Alice. It's ALICE. I love the methodology of those 5 steps. The problem I have is it's not meant to be sequential. And when I test people back on Alice, they don't remember what to do when. I found in most companies that I work in, I do a lot of financial services, government, healthcare. Run, hide, fight is pretty self-explanatory. So. All right, so the question is, should security disengage your access control systems so people can get out? Yep. Yeah, so if I go out an emergency exit and it triggers an alarm, so I guess my question is we'd have to discuss, does that alarm automatically go to the fire department? Does it go to your security police? Yeah. So that would be something specific to your company. You would want to train people like, hey, that door alarm doesn't necessarily mean a fire. It means something's going on. It may not be a fire. So I got time for one more question. If not, we can all go have a drink. Yes, Lloyd. So the question is, do I have any personal experience with someone trying to set up a fake fire drill in order to draw people out? I haven't personally, but again, if you look at several active shooter situations, they have tried to do ambushes or incendiary devices at secondary locations. So it's one of those things, unfortunately, it's kind of like cybersecurity, right? The bad guys get more sophisticated, the good guys have to get more sophisticated. So it's kind of an evolving thing. And that's again why I like Run is, even if you work in my company, if we all scatter, you're not going to know where we're all going to run. It's more of a chaotic situation. All right, well, that's our time. I'll be up here if anyone has any questions. Thank you, guys.